Wow, what a roller coaster ride last night, huh? If you were like me, you got taken by the red mirage a little bit. And I just was like, wow, he's going to do it. He's actually going to pull this off. He's going to win. He's going to do it again. The polls were way off. And then, of course, throughout the night and into this morning, we see that Joe Biden has caught up. And it is now looking more and more likely that Joe Biden is, in fact, going to win the election. Now, I know there's going to be some challenges in court. That's to be expected. I would expect that from either side in an election this close. I would expect that either one would say, oh, we got to gear up and go to court. So I would expect that the Trump administration is going to do that. I know there's a lot of questions about what is going on in Wisconsin and the vote count. And I'm actually going to do a separate segment on that, talking about what some are saying might be voter fraud in Wisconsin. We're going to look at the numbers. We're really going to dissect that a bit. But really what I want to focus on this in right now with you is, let's just say Joe Biden did win, in fact, and he's going to be the next president of the United States. And now we see that, the Senate is going to remain Republican. The House, it looks like Republicans actually gained some seats in the House, but it'll still probably be a Democrat majority. Look, with the Joe Biden win, and I've been saying this all along, and I'm going to say it again, but this is a disaster for the progressive movement. Joe Biden winning is a disaster for the progressive movement. And the progressive movement, absolutely, and I'm now convinced of it, now that this is all sunk in and it's real for me. I mean, there was a lot of, in the weeks prior, this kind of what if scenario, and we all kind of pontificate here and there. But now that it's really real for me, I'm feeling this even stronger, that a Trump win would have been better for the progressive movement than a Joe Biden win. And I'm going to explain this to you, that now I believe progressives are now the Freedom Caucus of the left. They are just essentially now going to become an annoying faction that squeaks their wheels in the Democratic Party, but ultimately always falls in line, and ultimately can be counted on to fall in line, and ultimately doesn't make that much change. There will be some changes that they make. There will be some, inroads that they'll be able to make, but ultimately the progressive movement is now just a caucus inside the Democratic Party. And what I saw that was, to me, very frustrating, and I know for many others that watch this show and other shows, what was very frustrating was that so many of the so-called progressives that were real progressives, hardcore progressives in 2016, all throughout 2018 and into the 2020 primary, those progressive shows really all fell in line. Everybody said, essentially, you know what? Okay, vote blue no matter who, because we're having an existential crisis. And if we don't, oh no, Donald Trump wins. And that is the big disaster. They fell for the narrative. They fell for it. And hook, line, and sinker. And they coalesced and they fell in line like sheep. And show after show after show, and I've been very disappointed. And actually now I'm personally having an existential crisis. I don't know if I'm a progressive anymore based on what is going on inside of the progressive movement or whatever it is anymore. But look, there's this idea that, okay, if Joe Biden wins, which we think he did, we're going to assume he did, that Joe Biden wins, and now the progressives can push him to the left. They can maybe get in there, win some House seats. This is kind of the plan with Justice Democrats. They're thinking, well, what we need to do is we just need to win some seats. And if we win some seats, then what we could do is we can get in there and we can really push them. We could push the House. We could push the administration to the left, like the Freedom Caucus has been attempting to do with the Republican Party. And the Freedom Caucus is larger and stronger than the progressives. And it would take the progressives at this point needing to gain about 3 to 4 times the members in the House to even be at the level that the Freedom Caucus is for the Republicans. And even then, what has the Freedom Caucus been able to accomplish? Not much. Yes, they've done some things. Yes, they've been able to stop. They stopped the repeal and replace for the ACA. They didn't feel that Paul Ryan's repeal of ACA went far enough, so they blocked it, which is, you can imagine that scenario with the Justice Democrats in the House. You could imagine if they gained enough people, which they don't have right now. They've got 10 members. Freedom Caucus has 37 members at the moment. And Justice Democrats now, with the elections that they won, taking into consideration this election cycle, they're going to have 10 seats in the House. Yes, that's a growing number. It's better than 1. It's better than 3. It's better than 5. But it's still nothing in comparison to even what the Freedom Caucus has. And my argument is the Freedom Caucus has been able to accomplish not much. And they're reliable. The Freedom Caucus, at the end of the day, is ultimately reliable as a Republican vote, especially when it comes to countering Democrats. And so they've really just become kind of an annoying faction inside the Republican Party. They started off, and their creed, was we are against John Boehner. That was the Freedom Caucus's idea. They said, okay, what we're going to do is if you want to be a Freedom Caucus member, you need to be against the Speaker of the House. Okay, I can imagine that scenario with Justice Democrats and progressives, right? Then they said, okay, now we're going to, push them. Things aren't going far enough. They're not where we want them to be. So we're going to withhold our votes. And like I said, they were able to do some things such as stop the repeal and replace, because to them it didn't go far enough. So they did have some victories, but they're small at the end of the day, and they're not that impactful, and they can be counted on as Republicans, as loyal Republicans at the end of the day. And that is now, with this election and with all of these independent, progressive outlets calling for just fall in line, get in there, vote for Biden. You know what? Vote blue no matter who. Do it, and we'll push them once we're in there. Doesn't work, guys. It hasn't worked. The Tea Party showed you that. The Freedom Caucus showed you that. You got to learn. That doesn't work. That's not a working strategy. The only strategy that has worked is a presidential candidate, a primary candidate, being able to rile up the masses. And that is what Bernie Sanders was able to do in 2016. That is what Bernie Sanders, along with others like Tulsi Gabbard, Andrew Yang, even Marianne Williamson in 2020 were able to do. They were able to take the masses and use that large platform that a presidential election gives them, and they were able to gain momentum in the masses only during the presidential election cycle. Now, there was a bit of a pushback. There was that energy in 2018, but that energy was riding off the energy of 2016. But without 2016, would there have been an AOC? Without 2016, would there even be Justice Democrats? No, there wouldn't have been. You needed Bernie Sanders in that 2016 presidential primarying Hillary Clinton, going after the establishment, yelling about it loud and clear, and the masses waking up. You needed that presidential election. Now, with Joe Biden winning, you've got 12 years before you can do it again. Maybe 8 if Kamala Harris doesn't win in 2024. Then maybe in 2028, we can have another progressive uprising, and there can be this person that comes along and that once again challenges whoever the incumbent is, who would be a Republican, let's say in that scenario, and get people motivated and finally, talk about policies for the people. Without that presidential election, you don't have a movement. All you've got is a squeaky wheel caucus. That's it. So, and the plan, guys, don't be naive. The plan is Joe Biden, he's going to be, 82 by the time 2024 runs around. Democrats aren't dumb when it comes to the elections. They know how to work elections. They know how to get their way, clearly. And so what they're going to do is Joe Biden will not serve his first full term completely. He can't. They can't afford him to. They need him to step aside. They can't afford just an endorsement of Kamala Harris. She'll be the vice president. Vice presidents don't do much when they're vice presidents. They just kind of hang out. Like, look at Pence. He's like weekend at Bernie's in the Oval Office. That is what Kamala Harris will be for the next couple of years, and they can't afford that. If they want her to actually win in 2024, she needs to be the incumbent. She needs to have the incumbent advantage. So Joe Biden will be stepping aside at either 2.5 or 3 years in to give Kamala Harris the Oval Office, to give her those meetings, the op-eds, the photo ops. She needs the photo ops. She needs the handshakes with the world leaders. She needs policies under her name. That way she can run as the incumbent in 2024. That means in 2024, there will be no primary challenger. Sure, you might get some friend, like Bill Weld, who challenged Trump, but it won't be serious. It won't be a real challenge because it won't be a real primary. Everybody already will have said, no, Kamala Harris is the incumbent, and therefore she is now the one we have to rally behind. And she's a woman, and she's a woman of color, and this is historic, and they're going to, that's what they're going to do. So there will be no primary challenger in 2024. It'll be Kamala Harris. And then if she wins, then you're looking at, she'll be the incumbent again in 2028. You won't have another chance at a progressive uprising at that point either, because you won't have the power of a presidential primary. You need that power in order to gain steam. Otherwise, like I said, and I'll continue to say, you're just a squeaky wheel caucus. You're dead in the water, guys. And that is why a Joe Biden win is a disaster for the progressive movement. Now, I know, every commentator I watched, I listened, all the people on TYT, I heard Crystal Ball say it, I heard, Kyle, all these people saying, look, you cannot think that, their thinking was, and, and I can understand the logic, which is, look, if Joe Biden loses, then the Democratic Party will have no choice but to move to the left. They'll finally learn their lesson and they'll move to the left. And they're saying, no, that's not realistic. What will happen is what happened after 2016, which is they moved even further to the right. Well, I don't agree. I think this election, they got every Republican they possibly could get. They got Colin Powell, they got the McCains, they got everybody that they could possibly get siphoned out of that Republican Party. They got actual Republicans. It wasn't like they just moved to the right. They got actual Republicans. They were able to actually infiltrate the Republican Party and gain those votes. So there is no way they could win any more Republican votes from the Republican Party any more than they did this time around. This was their last hope. Had they lost this election, again, we're acting like Joe Biden has got it in the bag. Had they lost this election, they would have actually had to really think again about their strategy. There would be no way for them to win over any more Republicans because Trump wouldn't be on the ballot in 2024. It wouldn't have been Trump. It would have been whoever else the Republican Party comes up with, maybe Nikki Haley, in which case you're really not going to win those Republican votes. So those those suburban mom Republican votes, you're not going to win those with the Nikki Haley ticket in 2024 on the Republican side. You're not. So I don't agree that a Biden loss would have just meant the Democrats moved further to the right. I think they went as far right as they possibly could this time around without just becoming Republicans fully, which they kind of did by getting all those Republicans. And I think this ultimately was the worst case scenario for the progressive movement. It is now not a movement anymore. It is now a squeaky wheel caucus inside the House. Again, I do think that they might gain enough, coming in the next elections, they might gain more seats. I think they might gain and get up to the size of the Freedom Caucus where they've got 30, 40 members, but it won't be enough to make real change, just like the Freedom Caucus doesn't make any real change for the Republican Party. Furthermore, one of the issues that I'm having now with this progressive movement and why I don't know if, I can even identify with progressives anymore is the fact that the focus has shifted, and the focus isn't what I really believed in, after around 2016 or whatever, the economic focus. Now, I know on like the Justice Democrats website, I know that they still say, oh, we're for, and they've got all these economic policies. But at the end of the day, they prioritize racism, bigotry, sexism. They go into that identity politics. They go into that narrative. And then they say, we've got to vote blue no matter who. That's my beef with them, is that they're not actually challenging the establishment's narrative. The establishment wants you to stay distracted with all of this other stuff. They want you to believe that the worst thing that's happening in your life right now is your racist neighbor. They think that guy is the biggest threat to you, like he's going to come over to your house and do really bad things to you. That person is the threat to you. It's not actually the big banks who are reeling you into further debt, who are running off with all the money. It's not really the fact that we've got a corporatist government that's on the take. That's not your big threat. Your big threat is actually your neighbor. Yes, okay, this other thing is a threat too, but your neighbor's the worst one. They fell right in line with that. And they ignored the reality of the way this country has been going and slipping into, for the last 100 years, a nation on the take. They've lost focus of that. Now, when you go to their site, you see a laundry list of demands that I don't even agree with half of them. You know, I look at the list and I'm like, I'm not for, or not even if it's on their site. I think actually a lot of the, you know, if I'm being fair, I think Justice Democrats, a lot of the stuff on their site is actually stuff I agree with. I think what happens, though, is that in practice, like in theory, it all looks good on paper or on a site. But then in practice, what happens is they slip into this other space, right? And that other space they slip into is this: let's abolish everything. Let's change everything because it's not working for us. We're not winning, so we need to just change the whole system. And let's abolish everything. And, you know, racism is the worst thing that's happening in this country. I don't agree with any of that. So I have a hard time falling, you know, I don't agree with the censorship they're calling for. These members of these progressive members, the Justice Democrats in particular, I focus on them because there is a progressive caucus, but it's not really... The progressive caucus isn't what I would consider progressive. I'd say Justice Democrats are the ones that were the most progressive of the progressives. So that's why I'm focusing it on them. They look, a lot of those members are calling for censorship. They're calling for the big tech censorship. I can't get on board with that. They're calling for radical changes that I am not in line with. I just want us to stay hyper-focused on the damn economics, guys. That's it. Laser focused. You need to remain a one-issue voter. You need to remain a one-issue, hyper-focused group, because people in America vote on one or two, maybe three issues. That's it. They can't go through a laundry list and then say, okay, I agree with you on getting money out of politics. I agree with you that we need Medicare for all. I agree with you that we need to talk about free public college education. But then I got to agree with this 20 other list thing that I cannot agree with. That is the big problem. You can get the majority of Americans to agree we need money out of politics. You actually now in 2020 can get the majority of Americans to agree on that, and you drop the ball. That's my problem. You drop the ball on that. Now you've got Republicans like Matt Gaetz who've said sworn off super PAC money. You know, you've got, or corporate PAC money. You've got Republicans who, like Ken Buck from Colorado, who are talking about money in politics and draining the swamp. You've got Republicans now who are talking about these things, and yet, no, they're the enemy. No, we can't, no to them. We need to stay on our side. Change doesn't have to happen from the left. I'm willing to take that change no matter where it comes from. I don't care. I'm not a party loyalist at all. And it's been very disappointing to me to see all of these, so-called anti-establishment folks ultimately fall right in line with the establishment. They fell right in line with party politics, and they said, oh, no. We are ultimately Team Blue. We are Team Democrat. Well, I'm not. I'm not a Democrat. I'm not Team Blue. I'll become a Republican if the Republicans turn into more progressive populist folks that actually want to help people. If they start taking on way more worker-focused policies, then I don't care which side. I don't care about the label. I don't care. And neither should you if you're a real, true progressive who really was looking for progressive change.